Vanessa Grigoriadis.
Wow, that
Pretty
is
good.
impressive pronunciation there.
Yeah, well,
Have you considered being a translator at the UN?
no,
You
but
think
I've known you for 10 years now.
Yeah, that's right.
I felt bad. You did this. Was it Men's Health or Men's Journal?
Men's Journal.
Did you get the message that I left for you after?
I did get the message, but you still did kind of screw me. Tell the people what happened.
This is amazing. Well, okay, all right. This is not what we're here to talk about, but let's get into it. So you write this feature on me for.
I'm a magazine writer.
You're a magazine writer.
Does not normally write about sports.
Doesn't write
but
about
I
sports. You were
did
hired to write
some
about
different people. Like
you traveled with us for. You spent some time on this story for Men's Journal, and this is in 2008, or was it 2007? It was 2008.
Yeah, around that. I think.
And so we were traveling around doing Livestrong stuff, etc. And it was an in-depth piece. We had in-depth conversations about, and you might have even asked me, would you ever consider coming back? If you did ask me that, then I'm going to feel really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then like a month later, I was like, I think I'll come back. which was a stupid idea. But
Are you going to try to tell me that you didn't know it at the time?
Yeah, I am going to try to tell you that.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Because
Mark, will you back me up here? March 2008. March 2008. I didn't. If that's the timeline, I didn't. The idea came to me in the summer of 2008. I started training with a guy, started getting fit, and then did Leadville, this mountain bike race outside of Aspen. And at that moment, that's the moment where I was like, all right, I'm gonna come back again. So, but then I remember we had a good time doing that piece. I was like, I bet she's thinking that I hid this from her.
Well, I think the issue was more that when I came away from the Livestrong kind of cross-country tour that we did, and I talked to my editor, he said, well, maybe we'll kind of like angle the piece about if he's going to run for political office.
Well, that was
right?
the headline.
And that was the idea.
The future governor of Texas.
Had I known that you were about to make a comeback, we would have gotten with a different thing. And then I believe that you gave that whole thing to Douglas Brinkley for Vanity Fair.
Yeah.
Which seemed to come out like maybe on the same day that my story came out.
Right.
So then I thought, well, one person has the correct story here.
I know, and I felt bad about that, and so I called you. I was like,
you did call me. That was very nice.
Yeah.
And I think it shows good character, which you have through the years, and you own up and etc.
Own up when you mess up.
That's right.
So speaking of getting in contact with you, so every morning I get up and I read the news. I normally start with ESPN.com, and then I'll go to CNN.com, which is pretty hard to read. There's a lot going on there. But my favorite sort of news site is the Daily Beast. And it's just...
Why is that your favorite news
because
site?
it's easy to read. You know, you have a few features every day that evolve and revolve and move on. And then, you have what they call the cheat sheet on the right side, which is so easy. It's like the top 10 stories, or what they think are the most important stories of the day. So this is it's September 5th, which I only know that because I have the email which I wrote to you. And one of the features is you writing about you, or you writing about...
Somebody interviewing me.
They interviewed you for this book.
That's right.
And, your name always pops.
Right.
So I'm like, my girl Vanessa. Am I going to get in trouble for saying that?
She finally wrote a book. No, I think you're allowed.
Okay, good.
Okay.
So the whole piece is about this book. And I sent you this email September 5th, like, you go, girl. No response.
No, total radio silence. That's
Nothing.
Right.
I'm like...
That's right.
I'm like, She's really pissed about that comeback thing. She's not, like, she's darking me.
No, I believe what happened is it went to my junk mail.
Awesome.
And then I was going to sit down and do it. And then something else happened. I had a crazy, crazy, crazy book tour. And also, we don't have to get into this, but a lot of personal issues in terms of family crises and emergencies and all of that. So I just basically... anything that required more than a hey, thanks, was just like immediately kind of put on that back burner area. So, but I appreciated it, and I did get back to you. It did take some time. No offense.
But it was good. It was good timing because, it finally came back in. I was like, there's Vanessa, and but a couple of crazy things happened, right? So, this is September 5th. You write this book about it's about sexual harassment on campus. Mm-hmm. This is 9/5, October the 5th. This issue becomes the issue.
Yes. Who could have foreseen that?
So the New York Times writes the piece on Harvey Weinstein, and this issue is off to the races. Not so much on campus, but just in our society.
Right. I had the milieu a little bit wrong. I went one way, everybody else went the other way.
No, but
yeah.
it's
the same. It's the same issue. Right. Yeah. So, I started working on this book because obviously sexual assault and harassment on campus was the issue 2 or 3 years ago. Right. So when I started working on the book, the UVA story that Rolling Stone ran that ended up being this hoax and kind of like sent everything in a really weird direction, that hadn't even come out yet.
Right.
So I was like, okay, this is about to become a big issue, but writing a book takes a couple years. Yeah. It's not that quick. So, the book is really, first of all, is just a discussion of like philosophical theories of sexual consent. Like, what are they really? And what were they for Gen X and boomers? And what are they today? Because that's the underpinning of everything we're discussing right now, right? Like when you think about Harvey Weinstein, what these women are really saying is, not only did he try to rape me, this guy, but he didn't listen to me, right? But also, that was a scenario where my consent was almost taken away, right? I was a 22-year-old starlet. My entire life was just about, like, when can I get in a room with Harvey Weinstein and he could potentially anoint me as, like, the first lady of Miramax after Gwyneth Paltrow, right? And, like, I'm finally here and I'm in the hotel lobby and they say, go to Harvey Weinstein's room, and he answers the door in a bathrobe or whatever. Like, so part of the book is about like, okay, well, what is the power dynamic that just existed there that took that girl's consent away to a certain degree? And I know that is somewhat controversial to say because a lot of people would say, well, she should have just walked right out of that room, Some of them clearly had sex with him after that and never told anybody and don't complain today.
Clearly,
right?
but that's to me, whether it's harassment on college campuses or whether it's Harvey Weinstein, Matt Lauer, et cetera, which just sent off this just flood of stories, is, and again, I like to think that I've never been in that position from the male perspective, but at some point these guys were like, oh, this works. I can get away with this. Like I don't bat 1,000, but if they bat 500, they think. Send them up. Send them up. I'm going to put the robe on. I need a massage or whatever they say.
No, Harvey Weinstein, this was clearly an obsession, a compulsion, a nearly daily need, just like eating or, overeating, right? In his case, he was like this just like greedy kind of Jabba the Hutt kind of person who was just like gluttonous. I know this stuff because I was a journalist. I've worked in Manhattan as a journalist among the elite for 15, 20 years. Like I knew the stories about Rose McGowan, all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I've thought to myself, wow, I never thought, oh, you could report a story like that. I just assumed that's, page 6, that's unreportable stuff that never really, gets into the mainstream. But from your perspective, I'm curious because, from the female perspective, we can talk about nuance that guys can't talk about because we're able to, because we're women, because we're the ones who are mostly affected here. Yep. B, we do see this as an incredible social reckoning and important dramatic social shift that we're really excited about having happen right now. Yep. But from a male perspective, and particularly a man who has had some power, do you look at these stories and think like, well, what's wrong with these guys? Or do you think like, come on, when you're a man who has power, women throw themselves at you all the time. Like some of these stories are kind of bogus.
You want me to burn myself on my own podcast. This is amazing. I love, thank you. Vanessa, thanks for coming on. Everybody buy the book. Hey, have a great 2018.
Yeah.
No, I think, look, there's been so many of these stories, and a lot of these people I either knew or were good or were friends with, right? So Matt Lauer, I've been around dozens of times. Charlie Rose, I would consider a friend.
Okay.
Harvey Weinstein, I've been around a handful of times, and that was enough, even as just a dude in passing.
Yeah.
Look, I think.
And Matt and Charlie, did you know those stories?
Not Matt Lauer.
Right. I did know the Charlie Rose ones too.
Yeah. Charlie, and I actually mentioned this to Charlie Rose once, and he called me later. He's like, why'd you say that? But it wasn't so much a harassment thing. It was just a womanizer. And this is more than 10 years ago, so maybe that's what we referred to.
Right, exactly. That was the code word.
Right,
back
womanizer.
Then. Yeah.
But to me, a womanizer is a guy who, just sort of flies around and hits on women, but then we start to define these things. You grab her ass, you touch her breast. I mean, it gets pretty aggro, which at that point I'm like, I just don't know that you can do that, right?
Right.
So but yes, men of power. But by the way, too, I mean, go back. I mean, this is, look, we can have the discussion of Donald Trump, which is an easy one to have, an easy one to hate on. And I'm a friend of Bill Clinton. I mean, go back to that story. Like, that's like the original, right? That's the original big story. And everybody shit on Monica Lewinsky, and now you look back on that and you're like, oh my God.
Right. No, Monica has had a huge resurrection here.
For sure.
As somebody who was attacked also by feminists. Remember, like Erica
Big
Jong
time.
and all these people were saying what is this cheesy girl with her love poetry and her bad friendships with dumb women in the Pentagon who are screwing her. How could somebody who's not clever like this even attract a president's attention, right? This is no Marilyn Monroe. They really put her, they put her on the ropes.
They tried to destroy her.
Sure. And, some of that was political, and some of that was just that, I think we're just in a different moment.
And and you're a member of you report on this stuff. You wrote a book about, things like this. You write for The New Yorker, you write for Vanity Fair, so you report on these things. And my whole life, or most of my life, has been reported. And I don't always like or agree or think that what has been reported is true. So I always, with everything that I read, it could be this
fake
issue.
News.
It could be it could be war. It could be sports.
Well, there's an angle behind it. You know that there's potentially a communications person behind it who's steering the reporter in a certain way, right? And there was some off the record or whatever on background information coming from somebody who's the enemy of the person who's written. I mean, there's, yes, when you're in the business of either being somebody who's written about or writing about somebody, you kind of look at it and you're like, oh, that's how the sausage is made, right? Like this Michael Wolff thing that's going on right now. I mean, I have known Michael for years. I actually am friendly with Michael. I like Michael a lot. But, I read a story that he wrote in The Hollywood Reporter last year, and it was right after the inauguration, and he was like, I am sitting here with Donald Trump, and I am here to tell you that Donald Trump is so patient man. He is a smart man. He is a man you can trust. America really should embrace this man. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? And then when I read that he had this book coming out, I was like, of course, right? And he's on the Today Show saying, well, I just said whatever I had to say to get the story, right? I wrote these things so that Trump was like, wait a second, this is a guy who's in my corner. So there's I wouldn't do that. I mean, I think that that's a little bit crossing a line, right? But there's, everybody, look, it's true at the same time that this thing about sexual assault and harassment is a great reckoning, right? for sure. And it is all good. It is also true that there's some people in the mix who are not reliable, and there's some stories that are being twisted around.
Well, the UVA
and there's
story.
People, right, the UVA story,
the Duke
sure.
story. I mean, the Duke story is 15, 20 years old. It's an old story.
Right. You know, of course, like, when you talk about something like, you know, rape in a college campus by Southern students who are elites, and, you know, in the Duke story, there was a racial element, right? And this idea of kind of town and gown, and, you know, what are these boys' morality? What is this boys' morality really? Because what was true was that they were a lacrosse team who hired some strippers and did some not so nice things to the strippers while they were there. Yeah, so it wasn't so fabulous.
No, it wasn't.
Right?
It wasn't nothing.
It wasn't nothing. But, you know, those kinds of stories are just, they're catnip to the American psyche, I think. They push all of our buttons, and they make us really kind of flip out about, like, social dynamics and sex and illicit sex and, like, who has the power, and the idea that these white, you know, young elite men are really just all rapists at their core, and, you know, all really racist, and blah, 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 blah. And I think that right now you can see a little bit of, you know, women are there's so much pent-up anger, particularly among young women, right?
We're about to see it in full force when the award season starts.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
Every award show is going to have the youngest, prettiest girl up there talking about Me Too, which I mean, but we are going to get pounded with this stuff.
Well, I think that there's a couple of different things going on. First of all, I think that there's a group of older women who are more in Gen X or boomers who have some really, really nasty stories and never really got any justice, right? And those women who, you know, have come out about Weinstein over the years, et cetera, are really just finding this to be an incredibly cathartic moment, because this is something that they had happen to them, that they told their friends, that their friends told them to move on, they told their shrinks, the shrinks told them to move on. You look at Mira Sorvino was saying things like, Harvey Weinstein destroyed my career, you know, and I knew it, and I told people it for years and years, and nobody believed me, and everybody said it was sour grapes. And now they're like, the world is embracing them. So this is like just like shocking and amazing, and all the people around them are saying, oh my God, you know what? Maybe we were wrong, right? So there's that. Then there's the actress thing, which is really complex, because actresses make money off of their sex appeal. Like, that is what makes people want to put you in a film, right? And so the casting couch has gone along with that, and things that have gone way further than the casting couch forever and ever and ever. And yet at the same time, there's no female directors, right? There's like 7% of female directors in the Academy. A lot of these women are brilliant. They could be great writers. They could be great directors. They never get any power, really. They're only just an actress, right? So there's a lot of pent-up anger among them, too. Yeah. And then the third thing that's going on, and that it really is the driver of everything, is that you have these young women in college or just getting out of college who have grown up with a totally different mindset than somebody like me, right? I'm 44. I grew up, you know, some of my friends are moms, some of my friends are not, some of my friends are successful, some of them are not. The women generally don't really try as hard as the men. They drop out. They go to law school, but they drop out after a couple of years.
Quitters.
Whatever. Total quitters. Yeah.
Quitters.
You know, they're just like, we pay all this money for childcare, you know, we work and plus childcare, we just kind of accept it. We're kind of like vaguely socially active, but not like, you know, we went to the Women's March, but we're not like that involved. Now you got these 20 to 25-year-old girls who are radical feminists like there haven't been since 1970, right? These are radical women, and they are like, we will not accept any of this. We will not accept casual sexism. We're certainly not accepting sexual assault. We're not accepting sexual harassment. We're not accepting a boss who says, oh, hey, why don't you come over and let's have a drink later and we can talk about your PowerPoint. You know what I mean?
That's
we're putting on
acceptable?
social media.
That's not acceptable?
I don't think there's any like private area that any of those women want to go to with their boss. And that's not to say that women are not attracted to men with power, because they obviously are. But like this whole idea, remember also, they're like, oh, wait a second, we still make less than men, and the Fortune 500 companies still have only a small percentage of women that are CEOs, and you mean in Congress, there's only some women who are, we're going to change all that.
Yeah, no, there's no safe place here.
Boom. They're like pushing everything. And of course, advertisers, media, everybody's like, whoa.
Yep.
Because women are controlling the disposable income, right? Wait a second. These women want to talk about this stuff? Let's go for it.
Yep.
Let's go for it,
Yep.
So...
And do you think because I saw this, I don't know where, maybe it was on Saturday Night Live, but there was this spoof with Fred Armisen and Tom. Did you see this thing?
I don't know. I don't think so.
It just in terms of talking about the workplace. So Fred is clearly a boss. He walks up to a lady sitting there and he says something like, would you like to have come over and have a drink and talk about that? So he says it. And the lady picks up the phone, calls HR. It's like, get over here right now.
Right.
2 seconds later, Tom Brady walks up.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I was thinking you could come over later and we could talk about your PowerPoint. And she's like, I'd love to.
Right.
And then they go to the next thing, and then Tom Brady comes out in his underwear. And the lady's like, oh, I would be happy to. And
right.
It was.
But taking it to its logical degree, some of the stuff is ridiculous. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say it's not. And I do think that we have to own up to the fact that what these 20 to 25-year-old women consider to be sexual assault is just not something that I would call sexual assault. It's just like more minor forms of stuff. And it's more, in the area of, like, I don't want to say necessarily gray, but like, it's an aggression, but there might have been another way to deal with it other than going to HR. And at the same time, as a political issue, you're like, maybe they have a point. Because we do see that women, are getting better grades, right, through high school.
Not surprising.
They're what?
Not surprising.
Not surprising. They're going to college, right? Lots of colleges now are 60-40, women to men. Girls are being brought up, right? They're playing sports in a way that they didn't before. They're achieving in a way that they didn't before. And then they get into the real world and they go, oh, wait a second. You mean you're only going to hire me as an assistant at this company if I'm super cute in my little suit that I bought? I'm a major person here. I don't want to be treated like this anymore. So I feel like, again, with everything, it's like common sense principles will eventually kind of like infuse this debate. Right now, everybody's just like at crazy time. Like the idea that all of these stars are like going to be wearing black dresses to the Golden Globes and all the stylists are running around like across the country trying to get black dresses right now. On Monday, they're all going to wear black dresses.
And that I had not heard that. But I can imagine that this award season, it is the theme, right?
Right, for sure.
Seth Meyers is just going to have a complete field day with this.
Yeah.
It's easy to do that, and they should. I always wonder, though, with these stories, like Harvey Weinstein, you just can't have any sympathy for. Matt Lauer's like automatic door with the lock. Like that shit's just next level crazy. But I do wonder, because I've been there, like I wonder, like, do these guys ever work again? But in each case, whether it's Harvey Weinstein, Charlie Rose, Matt Lauer, Louis C.K., Russell Simmons, on and on and on, I'm like, because I've been that, not in this
scenario,
not for this.
Do you have something to confess?
No. There's been when this goes down, everybody looks at their boss or their coworker, whoever, and like, is there anything we need to know here? Like, just let's get it out of the way right now. We've had those conversations. I'm like, but it forces you to be like, oh my God, no. I mean, no, I don't have anything to confess. But I just wonder, like Brian Williams, when the totally different issue, makes up all this shit about being in Iraq and doing meth or whatever. I made that up. Yeah. But I'm like, does this guy ever come back? And he has
a show,
he
right?
He has a show,
And his show is good.
And it is good. And I suspect at some point he'll be...
Right. Well, what's really interesting about Brian Williams is that, like, in 2017 or 18, he wouldn't really probably even gotten in trouble for that.
Yeah.
Because there's so much crazy stuff going on in the media. But, no, I mean, I think the issue, I think sexual, that's the problem.
Yep.
I think the problem is, when you start saying sexual assault, even sexual misconduct, and using the word predator, people start freaking out, and nobody wants to be associated with you, even if what actually happened, like one of the guys that's on that roundup, right, is somebody who I'm friends with. And he,
what are you talking about, roundup?
The roundup of like the 50 guys who are the sexual assaulters who have all been like, Weinstein, Lauer, like all the guys who have, that's already come out, and et cetera. Roundup, I'm just saying, like, if you go to the New York Times or the Guardian or something,
I thought there was a whole
these are the men who have done this.
I thought we had a whole new piece coming out.
like a big roundup where we're all going with like a net. We're going on a net in Manhattan and getting the guys back for the
is doing a roundup.
Right, well, they might. But that guy, okay, he was in a limousine. His story is that he was in a limousine with this woman, and he was attracted to an employee. He was attracted to her. He kissed her on the nape of her neck. He was kind of like not letting her go, blah, blah, blah. This is like after the Christmas party. And
see, to me, this is already a problem.
Okay, well, but let me put this part in. He owned the company. He was the CEO and he owned the company. So on one hand, you say like, I mean, okay, come on. Maybe it was just the wrong woman, right? Because a different woman would have said, back off, or a different woman would have said, I am taking you to HR, or something like that, or maybe not cared, but she went to the press with this story. And the only issue is that it was his company. He was not just like a senior guy there. And do we need maybe a rule or something about that, or at least some sort of... Like, I would argue that maybe what we need is that before anybody, because like we're never going to stop workplace romances, but when you're in that kind of situation where there's such like a big discrepancy of power, maybe everybody has to abide by a simple question, which is like, are you okay with me kissing you? Or are you into this? Or do you want to leave here? Or after we get out of this limo, can we go to my apartment? Or something like that. Like
color-coded.
Well, I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous,
Green
but
light.
like if there's one question and then the woman says yes or kind of doesn't explain no, then I'm kind of okay with like whatever happens after that, okay, a question was asked. Right. But again, it gets to that weird power dynamic thing of you're the 22-year-old starlet, you go to Harvey Weinstein's room, now you have a really serious choice, right? How do I get what I want
on every
by
level.
The sexual favor? Yes.
On every level.
Something
I mean,
that
I'm not
is
a girl,
disgusting.
I'm not a 22-year-old aspiring starlet,
right.
but I don't like my set of options here.
Right, exactly. So, whatever. I'm not, like, what I'm saying is controversial because many of my friends were like, this is so ridiculous that our friend is on the list with Matt Lauer and Harvey Weinstein. Are you joking me? So he kissed her on the nape of her neck. Come on. Now that guy's branded for life, right? At the same time, you could say changing social norms, you break some eggs. That it is an allegory of a fall for everybody else to say, okay, I'm not going to do that. Yep. Right? That's
so let's get to this book. The interesting thing, and unfortunately, I showed you this before we started, but I'm going to show you this again. Do that laugh that you did when you first walked in. So when Higgins, my manager, bought the book at Book People in Austin, he calls me and he's like, dude, this is either totally random or this is the greatest marketing ploy in the history of publishing books.
I don't think so.
So you open it to the first page and it says, and you won't see it on the camera, it says, this aisle is where I got my first STD.
Okay, this is a Post-it. This is a Post-it.
Yeah, but you could easily, so you bring me my book. Can I see mine?
There's your book. It doesn't have the same Post-it.
And there's no Post-it, and I'm like, oh shit. So we were wrong. But
yeah, okay, so he bought it in a bookstore
yeah.
in Austin. I don't think associating a book with an STD is like a really good marketing ploy. Do you?
I mean, we all no, but I mean, we all talked about it. And
right, that's true. That's true. You guys, you know, but did you read the book, or did you just go like, oh my God, this book has an STD, I'm putting it down?
No, so here's the deal. Mark helps me with all my research. He's literally, I think he has a world record. Mm-hmm. The sumbitch can read books quicker than anybody. And, you know, everybody listening knows that I can't read a book to save my life. But I definitely got through a lot of this in my own sort of way. But here's the thing about two things, first of all, about this book or this issue. Mm-hmm. And the book that strike me is that when I thought about it initially, I thought I have 3 daughters, and I'm like, so this is an important issue for me. But as I started to dive into this, I'm like, this might even be more important for my 2 sons. Mm-hmm. Like just the education in and around this, and what is a green light and a red light and a yellow light, and then the second thing, which is much simpler or more funny, is that the fact that you researched this book as a 44-year-old woman,
I know, it's
using
so crazy.
your babysitter's 24-year-old ID or 24 her ID that says and you go to 20 some odd college campuses as a 24-year-old is fucking brilliant.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, I basically, so I, decided to write this book about like it's sex and sexual assault in college.
This your
and then
first
how
book?
was I going to, this was my first book, and I thought, well, how the hell am I going to do this? Mm-hmm. And, a college campus, you can just kind of wander in. But if you're like an old person, you're a weirdo, right? Like, why are you there? Are you like an adjunct professor? So I basically just kind of thought, well, I guess I'm just going to take a backpack, right? Like, I'm not going to carry a purse. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to just like go talk to people at the food court. I want to like actually go in the dorm, and I want to go to the frat parties, and I want to like hang out with people. So so I got my babysitter. So I couldn't take like my 1973 ID and give it to the bouncer at the frat party, right? Because he would just be like, you want to come in here? Yeah. I'm so confused. So I did. So I borrowed my babysitter's, ID that made me like 24 years old. But I told people, I mean, I would say, as a journalist, you have to say, like, I'm a journalist. You can't say, like, I'm a student here. But I didn't, when people would ask me, like, what, they'd be like, are you student? Are you graduate student? Yeah. And, because 20, I don't look 20. I mean, maybe I can get away with, like, a little bit older than that. But they would be like, well, when did you graduate college? And I'd just be like, I don't know if I want to answer that question. So
when you say, but hang on, when you say, look, just so you know I'm a journalist, you don't say, just so you know I'm a 44-year-old journalist. Right. You keep saying
no. I would just be like, I'm a journalist. But as you would talk, they'd be like, but when, they'd be, they want to talk to you about your college experience or something, and be like, when did you graduate? And I'd just be like, a long, long time ago. And then sometimes they would really want to know. And I would say, I graduated in 1995. And they'd be like, that was the year I was born.
Oh, boy.
So it's like really like 20 years later, like one full generation going back and looking at what changed. And, indeed, I loved hanging out with a lot of these kids. I thought it was super awesome. You have a lot of kids, like, like they're annoying, etc. But like also there's something like so invigorating about being around like 18 and 19-year-olds who are just like entering the world, and they're just like sponges for all kinds of information.
I'm with it right now.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They love to talk about, I mean, this kind of idea of consent, right? Because the colleges, the whole thing that went on with Betsy DeVos earlier in the year is part of like how the colleges, particularly in Texas, right, have gotten super involved in trying to like keep students safe, which also means keep students on a straight path about consent. Yeah. And maybe on a straighter path, a way straighter path than what their parents have taught them, or what some people may think a college should be involved in teaching, right? Because this is really about sexual etiquette. I mean, this is like really mind-bendingly weird in some ways, that your college that doesn't even like really teach you how to like open a bank account, like doesn't teach you really life skills, right? Teaches you about like the Odyssey.
Is that our job as parents to do that stuff?
Well, I think it is, but at the same time, parents don't really.
Hello, Lance.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, parents don't really talk in America. Very few parents really talk to their kids about sex. They assume that the church is going to do that, right? Or the friends are really the ones who step in, and that's not good.
Yeah, I'm paying attention to this.
Right.
I'm just hitting me.
I think the thing is that what the key really to remember is that a lot of stuff that is, it's like a lot of sexual stuff is fine by the court standard, right? Like it's really hard to get somebody to go to jail for rape because the guy just says like, oh, she consented and then it's over, right?
No, I watched your interview with, I forget the fellow's name. I was on the treadmill.
Reason.
Yes. So I was on the treadmill yesterday and I listened to it and watched it and you brought up this issue of how the police view these cases, these gray cases. Wait, you guys were together and everybody was happy to be together and then all of a sudden it wasn't okay. And the police are like, we don't want anything to do with that.
Right.
Like I was like, wow. But I guess if you think of like for them, they view those as really hard cases to pursue and to prosecute and to spend time on. But I'm like, wow.
Well, they try, but I think the thing is like somebody said to me who works with cops, like the detectives who deal with this kind of date rape stuff, which is what we're talking about, right? What we used to call date rape.
And now it's
like,
called, what do you have?
It's called acquaintance rape or something like that, because they're saying, well, are they really on a date? No, they just like talk to each other at a party, right? But that kind of situation, like, this person said to me, like, the cops who are the detectives who are dealing with that, like those are the true artists in the department, because you're looking at not a lot of evidence, weird sex and things may have gone on between people. A lot of times the next day, a lot of victims, genuine victims, the next day will call the guy and say, hey, I want to talk to you, something I feel, I kind of had a good time last night, but something happened I didn't feel right about. Can we try to work it out? And boom, a defense attorney has that. That's like the end of the game, right? Oh, I had a good time, but, give me a break. So it becomes, in the legal system, I mean, we all know this, right? It's hard, like the legal system's weird and hard, and it's hard to get justice for a lot of stuff. And there's a lot of stuff that happens in America that's not moral, that also doesn't rise to being a crime. And so my argument in this book is basically that, like, while some of these things are not crimes, and while, yes, in some cases we are talking about, like, shades of sexual etiquette that are, like, maybe will make some people uncomfortable, right? Like the nape of the neck kiss, etc. In some cases. What we really have to accept is that, women are just really tired of being treated like sex objects, of having their, like, main kind of power come from their sex appeal, from feeling like they can't get ahead in the workplace, from feeling all of these different, right, like they feel like, look, the alt-right will say, well, that's all backwards, because actually the women have more power than ever. And it's like, well, no, you're right. Actually, women do have more power than ever, but they want to have more. They want to try to get equal power, and they're not quite there yet. So again, like, you have to put yourself in the shoes of like a 23-year-old woman who has just graduated college and is going, in Dallas to get her first job. And the fact of the matter is that, like, I'm 44 now, but I was 23, and no matter like how hot you are at 23 or whatever, guys hit on you all the time, of all ages, totally inappropriate places. You're like renting a car or something. You know what I mean? Like just
sitting
random things. Yeah, people.
There's this new thing with like airplanes, like dudes. Like,
right, dudes are like all like octopussy. Right, like the Donald Trump story. Right,
you can't say the P word on this podcast.
Right. So like, putting yourself in the shoes of a woman who is like, feels like she fought really hard to get her education. She got all this debt. She's trying to make her way in the world. And she's just got like creepy dudes hitting on her all the time. Guys offering her jobs if she does X, Y, and Z, or implying something different. And there's just like a lot of anger among those women. And I think some of it is really justified.
Yeah. So the inspiration behind this book, and you can either tell me or not, is because of a personal experience you had, or because of the story you wrote for...
Well, I wrote a story for New York Magazine that was about the woman who was carrying the mattress around Columbia. Emma Solkowitz. And like...
Which is a crazy... We have to... This
story is a totally crazy story.
This story... I want to hear what you think, but I read the piece and know the story, and I'm like...
Yeah, well, it's a complicated story.
It is.
And part of the book is about, like, some of these complicated stories. But she, was kind of an art student at Columbia. She said she was raped by this guy that she was, like, having a fling with.
But on a night where they had, and I'm not picking a side here, but just so the listener knows, so these guys had hooked up before and hooked up that night. They had extensive consensual sex that night.
Right.
Until... they didn't.
Right. Well, so she says that he raped her anally, which, by the way, is pretty horrible, right? So if that did happen, that's really, like, the most violating thing you could really do to a woman, right? Painful and violating.
They went into, or you went into some pretty specific detail.
I did
about,
I did.
Well, not only in that story, but in this book. I mean, the language in the book, I'm like, damn, Vanessa, you did say that.
I know. It's not really. But if you're going to if you're going to really try to pick this thing apart, you have to get involved in, like, some of the, what is this sexual act and what did really happen.
But what made her
so she carried this mattress around. So basically,
Was it the mattress? Or was she just got a mattress?
No. She got the mattress from Tall Paul's Tall Mall, which is like a clearinghouse that sells the same kind of mattresses that Columbia University had, because they're long for boys who are tall for the dorms.
Right. She carried it all year.
Like,
by the way, all year.
Before Trump was president, everybody can cast their mind back. There could be weird viral stories, right? Like a girl at Columbia University carrying a mattress around to protest her rape, and those would become huge international stories for like 2 weeks. Now we just hear like Trump. You can't hear anything else. But at that time in 2014, this became a massive story because people were like, whoa, that is really intensely weird. Like, you're carrying a mattress around, which was really... theoretically interesting idea of, like, making private suffering public. It was a big mattress, so people could help her. Right, 50 pounds, so people could help her carry it, sharing the burden of this sexual assault, blah, 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 blah. Now, as the time went on, the boy said, well, I think I would like to put my story out through the Daily Beast. He did that, and his parents had livid. All sorts of, parents were totally livid, and he had all sorts of text messages between them that kind of, he thought showed that she was unreliable. And so I kind of make the claim in the book that, this is a mystery, that actually this case is a mystery, and you need to either throw up your hands or say, like, okay, what are the lessons we can take? Because one of the big things that we've been hearing from women is believe women, And so in the book, I kind of go into this idea of, like, believe women first, I think, is a really good place for people to be at. Yep. Like, believe all women is going to get everybody in a weird spot. Because you know what? People lie in life about everything. Like, there are some liars, and they're out there, and we can't pretend that doesn't exist.
No shit.
But, believe women first is not a bad place to be, because if your friend comes to you and says, this guy raped me or sexually assaulted me, colleges are really cliquey places. And a lot of times girls' friends were like, oh my God, I can't believe this. But then a few days later, it was like, well, what did you texted him this weird thing? And he's like on the football team and in this frat that I hang out at all the time. And his friends say he didn't do this. And like, I don't want to be kind of ostracized. And a lot of those girls were ending up like really feeling like social pariahs, that they should never have said anything, and they get super depressed because they're 19 and they freak out about everything at 19, and then they're like depressed, they're going home, maybe I shouldn't go back to college, and it really screws people up. That's real. That's serious.
Growing up in Plano, we had a girl, a friend ran in our circle that went to the University of Texas, and you write about this in the book, where that is the really the prime time for a lot of this to take place, and she was raped.
Yeah.
And she was never the same.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was quit college, came home, and was just a different person. Like that.
Right. That's the thing is that this is like really serious.
But this is in God, I graduated high school in 1989, so this is in 1990. Mm-hmm. And I just remember in my head, and nobody asked and nobody knew, but I was like, she must have been walking down an alley and got raped by a homeless guy, but it was probably not that. She was at a party, drinking, partying, having fun. Bam.
Yeah. Well, what we do know is, like, okay, we discussed all this consent and everything's so blurry and blah, 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 but, like, the passed out girl, the Steubenville idea, right? Like, the passed out girl who maybe somebody doesn't have, like, you know, aggressive intercourse with her, but people take her clothes off and look at her and stick some fingers in her or whatever, right? Well, that's what happened in Steubenville. Like, that's the kind of thing where you're like, okay, when we look at surveys, that's happening in college. Like, that's happening. Girls are reporting that happened to them. Like, I was unconscious. And, you know, in some cases you can say, okay, you're an idiot. Like, you went to that frat party or off-campus apartment and there were a bunch of guys there. It was 3 a.m. You were super drunk and you didn't go home and you just passed out on the couch, like, with 6 guys in the apartment that you don't know. Like, come on, you know? But on the other hand, I mean, you cannot blame that is like kind of blaming the victim to say, like, what's wrong with you? I think we should tell women that. Like, I think we should tell women, listen, don't be afraid walking from the library to the dorm. There's no guy in the bushes who's coming to get you. Right. That's the situation of what I just discussed. You go to the off-campus apartment and you pass out on the futon because you drank too much with a bunch of guys you don't really know. That's the really dangerous situation.
That's what you call. What do you call it? You call it the. Is that the red zone or what?
Well, the red zone is like the first few weeks of school. So it's just this idea, you know, that these freshman girls get to college
the world just
and
gets huge.
They
like,
get to college.
Whoa.
They're like, whoa,
no
I have no chaperone. I could do whatever I want. But they don't get invited to like any cool like jazz, like, you know, jazz like festival or something. They're like not having white wine at a professor's house. They're getting invited to like frats. Right. And a lot of times, like, you know, the guys who come early during orientation to the frats aren't just there because they can't wait to hang out with their buddies. They're there to see, like, oh, who are the freshman girls who are going to come in a week early before school starts? New blood here, like new talent, right? Like, who are these girls? And, you know, these girls are not street smart whatsoever. That's why when you go to, like, a college campus in September or August, you see a lot of these, like, little herds of girls walking around, right, in their little pastel dresses, and they're going, like, 16 of them to a party together, and they're sticking together. It's because the college and their parents, their moms, are saying to them, like, okay, you can go to the party, but you don't leave any of the girls behind. You go all together. All of you girls go together from your dorm floor. Mm-hmm. Be aware of where everybody is, and blah, blah, blah. Yep. Have your little squad. And, I mean, they look kind of stupid walking around like that, but that's actually really kind of smart. And the true, you know, a lot of this book is just about, like, normal guys and normal stuff that happens and how we can deal with it. Right. But it is true that there's like a 1-3% of guys, just like there are, you know, walking down the streets of Austin, just like there are anywhere, who truly are deviant, right?
But in Emma's story, or in her situation, this happens. They have consensual sex, and then it turns into something else. Mm-hmm. She tells the police, she confides in a few friends. Mm-hmm. A couple of the friends go, you know, either he had done that to them too, or they had heard that. So there was enough there that she was like, okay, this wasn't.
So that's the other thing that a lot of people are really interested in, is this idea of, well, what if there's more than one woman? You know, and you can see now in the articles that are coming out about all these powerful guys that the journalists are not really printing them off of one woman. Right? They're printing them if they have several. So we could say, like, you know, we're at this weird spot where one woman's word is maybe not really good enough, but like 3 or 4 is. So for her, she was like, you know, she's charismatic. I mean, she's a cool person, but she's not that, I didn't think she had the kind of mind control to make 2 other women really go to the college and this guy.
He said that that she did. He was, what did he say? So like, I was scared of her, or I was
right. I mean, I think like his point of view was basically that she felt like a spurned lover, that he had not really followed up or called her or anything like that. She had done that thing that I said before, which is like, hey, can we hang out and talk and have a chill sesh? And he had kind of blown her off. So he was like, I was completely like shocked when suddenly she brought this case. But, you know, there was one other woman who said that he was like emotionally abusive in a long-term relationship. And then there was this other woman who said he like groped her. So it wasn't like this anal rape. But like, I don't know. You have to think to yourself, okay, these are young girls. They're 19 years old. They can get into a weird gossip circle. But like a gossip circle is one thing. Actually going to the school and sitting down with a 50-year-old administrator and having an investigation and saying he did these things to me on this date at this time. I mean, you know, that's pretty intense. That's not a gossip circle. That's like way beyond.
And then they have this whole tribunal, which is it's not at the county courthouse. It's like a internal. I didn't go to college clearly, but it's like an internal trial.
Right. So like
where
Title
they have
IX trial. Yeah, exactly. Which they have, you know, again, like in Texas, they've been very like, they're really doing this. I mean, they have, you know, put a lot of resources. Of course, Baylor, you know, has been the big story of all of this time has been that Baylor story, which I think is going to continue in the courts for like ever.
Kenneth Starr.
You know?
I think it's the Ken Starr factor.
Him?
No, I don't know. I don't want to know anything. It's like they're 100 miles from us.
Right.
But I don't want anything to do with, you know, to me, Ken Starr, whatever, you know, obviously we talked about President Clinton and that he was in on that, and but Ken Starr goes from being the dean or whatever you call it at in Malibu there at
Pepperdine, right?
Like maybe the most perfect place in the world,
right?
To Waco.
Yeah.
I'm like, there you go.
Yeah.
Like, how's that
building
move?
So what do you think? So, you know, in researching this book, certainly part of what I found out is that, you know, the situation with college football is really demented and crazy, right?
Well, you touched on in that interview that just and it absolutely happens, right? This idea that we have, you know, we have the team,
right? And
of course the team then graduates, so we have to recruit. Let's bring in the recruits. I mean, the basketball story from Louisville with Pitino, and I mean that's a crazier story. But when these recruits come in, like they have to be entertained,
right? They
and
have
that's
to be
not
shown
let's go check out the latest movie, or let's go to the
arcade.
Yeah,
there's a pizza party in this dorm over here, right?
That's
like who are the hot girls?
Let's
who are
rock.
The hot girls? Right, exactly. So over and over and over, you see these situations where, you know, clearly, well, first of all, there's always like a recruit involved on these nights when they end up having these like gang rapes, which are someplace in between. You know, they start kind of like a semi-consensual thing. Like if you really look at the stories and you really talk to the women, you find that like, yes, you're talking about women. There may not be the top line cheerleaders, but they're on some sort of pep rally and they're the good time girls and they're hanging out with the guys and they're hanging out with the recruits. And one of the players kind of talks the girl into having like a threesome with the recruit and the player, and then it kind of
two dudes and a girl.
She's two dudes and a girl, but she's kind of into it, but she might not be, but she's into it, you know, enough that like you wouldn't call that necessarily rape, right? But then, like, this is what happened in the Golden Gophers case, right? Remember when they were protesting and saying we're not going to go to the Holiday Bowl, but then they did because once they saw the details of the case, they were like, ooh, this is pretty bad. Yeah. But like, you know, so there's maybe a consensual situation there, right? But then the player like goes and texts all his friends and is like, yo, I got this bitch in this room. Like, come on in. Like, we're going to pull a train on this girl. And, you know, this is, to me, like, really, when you look at it, like kind of extraordinary that you have college football, which is making more revenue than like the NHL now, right?
For sure.
Is so important. And these players are not getting paid, right? They're not really going to college, yet they know that sex is part of the
perk.
Is the perk,
That's the perk,
right? I'm a celebrity on campus, and these girls like me. And if I'm a recruit, I'm going to make sure I get laid when I, which college am I going to pick? I'm going to pick the one.
I love the language.
but I mean, like,
wait, I've got this bitch in the room. Come on in, boys. We're going to pull a train.
These are actual text messages for people. But okay, I would ask you.
But hang on, I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
I don't, because, I'm sure, and I know that happens in football. I think football is not the only place. I mean, it could be the swim team, the lacrosse team,
but when they when they do studies, they find that it really is the football and basketball teams. Okay. Like that, the swim and the cyclists and people
the
are
drama
not
club
necessarily.
They're not pulling trains at the drama club.
They're not pulling trains, but that that really, like, I don't know. I would just ask you as an athlete, like, what do you think should happen? Like, is there a way to make those college football players into professionals who then have their own money, where they don't have to be in like some skanky weird condo, and they could like be like, okay, I'm a professional.
No,
now,
so we've had this discussion on the podcast before, and my view is that if you are generating more revenue than the NHL,
right?
And we're about to see this as we get into national championship season. I mean, the energy and the amount of people there, and the amount of merch, and the amount of revenue, all of this stuff. The system as it exists today, it cannot continue. I mean, this is bullshit. These kids are risking their then you get all into head stuff, and you can't just say, hey guys, thanks for playing, here's your degree.
Right.
There has to be, but there also, you can't say, okay, you guys get $10,000 a week or whatever. There's some sort of incentive or incentivized system, a bonus system, a trust. Hey, you come and you play and you graduate, you get this, right? And so you can't, it motivates them to stay in school, et cetera, but it's not fair the way it is today, because then they do look for the $100 handshakes,
right?
Then they do look for the free sex,
right?
Or the part, they'll probably still look for the free sex once we start paying them,
right. But then they could take somebody to dinner and have a nice date and bring flowers and be like, I'm a baller. Right. I mean, I'm a baller is a different mindset than like I'm an unpaid scrub here, but these girls are my prize. Like that's a different. But I mean, do you think, there's been a lot of like discussion of like, well, is there just something about these guys, these football guys in college that just makes them, they are just aggressive through and through. So they're sexually aggressive as well, and it's about the sport itself.
Well, you in this book, at the end of the book, you have 13 sort of guidelines for kids, and then you have guidelines for the schools. But in one of the guidelines for the kids is beware of like the ultra, the alpha male, basically. Yeah. But athletes, look, I've been at the top of my sport. I've been at the top of the world, and I know what that feels like. But if you're, for example, if you're at University of Alabama and you're the starting quarterback, or a tight end who's going to be the number one draft pick, I mean, you roll around that campus like you are Elvis Presley, or Johnny Depp, or Frank Sinatra, or whoever,
right?
Like. So you start to lose, and you also talk a lot in here about the moral compass. Like, it's like, I can do whatever the fuck I want to do.
Right.
And nobody is going to, I mean, Jameis Winston, you talk a lot about it. I mean, Jameis Winston is rolling, and I don't know what happened or didn't happen, and I don't want to judge on it, but he's rolling around campus like, the fuck out of my way. Here I come.
Right.
I mean, and that's, look, not that I talk about Michael Phelps all the time because I love swimming, but if Michael Phelps, back up. I mean, you look at a guy like what's the fellow, Ryan Lochte at the Olympics. I mean, at the Olympic Village.
Right.
Imagine that. I mean, the Olympic Village is like the hottest sex scene in the world for those two.
Is?
Oh, it is the shit. It is on.
You heard it here first.
No, and I never stayed in the Olympic Village, but I know enough that I mean, those kids that go to the Olympics and stay at the Village, it is on. Like.
Okay.
So
It's good story for me. I'll think about an expose of the Olympic Village. Thank you.
But it's like a campus,
right?
And a guy like Lochte or Phelps or whoever it is, Usain Bolt, he's gonna roll through there like, "What's up?"
Right.
What time?
Yeah.
Where?
Yeah.
Here's I'm in room number, whatever. You know what was crazy too about getting into the books, this whole idea of Title IX, and it goes back to Emma from Columbia here. Like, I always thought Title IX was like a
sports thing.
This is a true story.
Right.
Until this morning, I thought Title IX was just about sports. Like, okay, if you have boys sports, then you also have to have girl sports.
Right. Well, because in the 90s, that was the big thing that everybody talked about.
But it's not. And this kid, also, Emma's accuser, uses Title IX as a boy.
Right. Well, because Title IX is supposed to be about gender parity, right?
Okay, well, he's like,
I'm in the university, everything has to be equal, which of course we know in sports it's not really. But like this idea that you would have the same kind of facilities or the same equipment for girls as for boys. But, it's also supposed to like keep girls safe from professors saying, hey, quid pro quo, you have sex with me, you get an A in your biology class, and then it's been extended to this idea of sexual assault. And then this is where it gets a little complicated, because it's like, okay, fine, I think we agree if a student rapes a student in the library, that would be sexual assault on campus. But like, what if it is an off-campus apartment, off-campus frat, during a student's social life, nothing connected to the university? This is the argument that Kenneth Starr has made in Baylor, that a lot of the Christian universities, right, who don't like this at all, because this was an Obama era idea, right? Regulate sex on campus, and a lot of Christian universities are like, we don't even want, what are you talking, like they made an abstinence pledge. I don't even know what you're talking about. They don't want the government involved. They don't want this idea on their campus.
Our kids don't have sex on campus, they're saying. Like,
right, they're like, our kids don't have sex.
No way.
Well, they're saying, their argument is basically like, if it didn't happen on the campus or a university-sponsored event, we don't want to hear about it. So the Jameis Winston thing, right? Off-campus bar, off-campus condo. That the university would just say, we're not involved. He might be our student, but she might be our student. But that didn't happen on our premises. So, there's a big argument about that going on. And then, of course, Betsy DeVos has come out and said, like, there should be a lot more due process in these courts, which is true. But, we certainly go back to that idea of, like, well, these are really, really hard cases to believe. So due process, great. Yes, everybody should be able to say their piece, and everybody should, all the boxes should be ticked, and this should be as much like a court as possible. I just, to be honest, looking at a lot of the cases, you're like, holy moly, like, I don't know how I would have decided this. Like, even I sitting here would have no idea if he really did this or not.
But that goes to the police. Like, why the police? They say the same thing. Like, we're just not.
Right.
Because we'll spend a ton of time, ton of resources, and at the end of the day, we'll literally throw our hands up.
So I think what you're seeing now is that what a lot of women have decided is screw the campus court, screw the actual court. We're going to go the kind of ostracism on social media route, or ostracism through the mainstream press if the guy is important. Because, like, there's a lot of situations like this going on today in small towns with, like, just like a girl who's 16 who's saying this on social media about this guy, or telling the people around her. And, like, these girls feel kind of newly emboldened to be public about it and to say, wait a second, I'm not ashamed that you sexually assaulted me. You should be ashamed that you did this thing that was immoral. And so, what I found in colleges is that, yes, of course, they're college kids. They make fun of everything. So they do make fun of this stuff. Yeah. But at the same time, a lot of guys are either, like, mortally in total fear. Like, oh, my God, I'm going to get accused of this. I saw my buddy go down for this. Or they're really thinking to themselves, okay, like, well, what is the morality? Remember, like, college kids love to think about morality. They love to stake out really extreme positions, right? So some of them are like, oh, maybe there is a new way of dealing with girls. Like, maybe I should be clearer. Maybe if, like, a completely wasted girl who can't speak English throws herself at me, maybe I'm not a good guy if I, like, take that to its conclusion. Maybe that's not a cool thing to do.
That's probably not a cool thing to do. And then by the way, too, this entire discussion is scaring the shit out of me. not only for
fear sells books.
No, but
fear
good. But yeah, for every parent out there, if you're not scared right now, you're weird. But when you're scared by the book, but like my son's heading off to college, like it would break my heart if I got that call, like Luke Armstrong has been accused. I mean, that would.
Right.
But then Grace and Isabel are 2 years away, and then they're going to go off to God knows where.
Right.
And have I equipped these kids both on the male?
I think you just have to say, like, everybody should be more clear. I think that that's what we're learning.
That goes back to the limo thing. The limo incident.
Right.
Like, is there just a? I personally think it should be like they should just wear a light, like okay, green light or yellow light. We'll see.
Right, like
red light, get the fuck away from me.
Consent app, yeah. Well, but just I think you have to say
let's go right now. We got it.
$1 billion idea.
Billions.
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody just needs to tell their kids, like, okay, you might have grown up and the idea that until somebody says no, it's a green light, but now things have changed and girls want to be a little bit more clear. So before you take somebody home, you really should just ask, hey, are you into this? Just one question. Just ask.
No, so here we go.
Get your answer.
And this is for kids, but I'm going to take this as also advice for me as a parent and to all the parents listening. All right, so here, I'm just going to run through them. You can elaborate a little on them as we go. But so here's recommendation number 1, which reading the entire and then having like, okay, here's what you have to take away. I love that. Like,
yeah.
My dumb ass is like, okay, got it. All right,
that's
so
the best part of the book. Yeah.
Here's number 1. Watch out for guys who exhibit toxic masculinity. Don't be friends with those guys if you're a man, and stay away from them if you're a woman. We just went over that with the alpha.
Well, this idea that like there's always one guy or two guys like in your group of friends who everybody thinks of as like the creepy guy who makes weird sexual jokes when things aren't sexual, who like girls are kind of like, he's weird. Like you can actually find out a lot about, like, if a guy expresses very, very misogynistic thoughts over and over and over in a way that even makes you as a guy be like, oh, that was kind of like a little much.
You may want to tone that down.
There's actually a pretty good correlation between that person acting badly in the bedroom too. Gotcha. Like a lot of the studies they're showing, they're like, okay, hey, these things actually kind of correlate.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Right.
Okay, here's number 2. Expand your cohort, your posse.
Right. That idea of like, girls stick together in their squad. And also like the more a student is, like a female mostly student is involved in like clubs, sports, even a sorority, actually, they find. The more you've got friends, the less that like really bad 1%, 2%, 3% of kind of predatory guys would ever like target a girl, because they'd be like, oh, she's got a lot of friends. I don't want to get involved with that girl. I'm going to look for the loner girl, right? That's why a lot of, like, when they talk about pedophiles, they say they always go for that loner kid, the kid that seems like he doesn't have a real support system. Ugh. Oh, I know.
So, number 3, I have to tell you, it seems that you are actually guilty of. It says, be aware of the in-network stranger. That was you.
That you?
No, that was you.
Why do you say that?
We're doing this book.
I'm the in-network stranger.
Or the
That's
older,
right.
because you say, the older.
Right. The older. Okay, so the other thing that a lot of these people who are studying this are finding is like the guy who, when you go to college, there's always like somebody's lacrosse player friend from high school is just coming to hang out, a few years older, out of college, but he's coming back for the party that night.
That was you.
And that's.
That was you. I mean, it was part of the job.
Totally me. I was this weirdo exploiting, the thoughts and stories of young children. But those are the people to be.
When you went to 20 campuses, you pretended to be a 24-year-old girl.
Yes. Which I am inside. Yeah.
Even better. There had to be some times where you're like, this dude is getting him.
Well, I had like a very weird experience where, I had like some guy say some totally things that are definitely not acceptable for this podcast, and kind of like threatening me in a weird, like he was hitting on me but threatening me at the same time, which was like, and I was like, oh my God, if I was 19, would I have somehow gone for this? Because I would have thought it was like dangerous and cool. Like, this is so weird. But I mean, I make the joke in the book, like at some, as I was reporting this book, I got pregnant. And then I was like, oh, now this, I actually cannot go to a frat party. Like before, the adult women, they were like, great. You look a little old, but you're still in a skirt. And I was like, pregnant? No. Yeah, that they notice.
Then
they
you're
do
like,
not want you there.
Let's hurry up. Before I start to. Right. Okay, so here, if you are assaulted and decide that you want to report the incident to authorities or your school, do not take a shower.
Right. So, this idea of evidence, right, that we were talking about with cops, like cops really want evidence. Otherwise, they don't want the case. So, if you are raped, you need to not take a shower. You need to put your clothes from the night before, either wear them, go to the, rape crisis center or the hospital, or, don't go to the police department right away. Just go to a hospital or something like that. Take your clothes, if you don't want to wear them, in like a paper bag. This rape kit is like this very invasive procedure, and it's really about catching like hairs, what's under your fingernails, like DNA, of course, if it was a stranger. I mean, it's, very serious.
It's good advice.
But it's true.
This is all
because
stuff
if you just like,
I never would have thought don't take a shower. Like, this is, my daughters have to,
right.
It's a whole nother. That's on me.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's with daughters, I think it's like a mix. You don't want to scare them to the point where they lose their street smarts because they're so scared of everything. But you also
Grace and Isabel Armstrong.
Right.
They won't be scared. World, watch out. Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of watching, don't watch your drink. Watch what you drink.
Right. So, lots of cases, the girl will say, Xanax. I was roofied, right? Or Xanaxed or something like that. But really, they don't, like, doctors don't find a lot of evidence of that. Of course, there are people who use that to, like, party or whatever. But, I mean, this is like, don't be afraid somebody's going to slip something in your drink. That's really the exception to the rule. The rule is really that you really just drank way too much and got out of control,
Which gets us to the next one, which is going to make you the most popular woman in America on college campuses. This recommendation, move the drinking age to 18.
Yes.
That is talking about a baller move.
I think that makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, like, how can it be at 21 when, college kids are going to college? I mean, they're not finishing in 4 years, right? If they're going to a 4-year college, they're finishing in 5 and 6 years. So you've got like half the campus that can't drink, half the campus that can drink. And then the people who can drink are just buying booze for the people who can't drink. And everybody's getting off on like the psychological trespass of it. Like, ooh, we can't drink. Ooh, let's get really drunk in this disgusting basement.
And cheap and,
let's have like these $2 Chuck and all these gross things.
Mad Dog.
Yeah, exactly. Like everything gross and beer funnels and, keg stands and all that versus like, this kind of European idea of like, you learn to drink with your parents and you drink with dinner and like, people, it's controversial to say, but some of the sexual assault problem is related to the binge drinking culture, which like colleges cannot figure out how to fix. Like they are working their asses off to try to figure out how to fix this binge drinking, and they have made no progress whatsoever.
And they won't. All right, don't speed read the sexual misconduct section in your university's handbook.
Well, this gets back to this idea of the well, this gets back to this idea of consent. Like, so universities, to cover their own asses, are making these really, really, really narrow definitions of consent. Of you have to ask, you need to ask, you need to say, or she needs to have taken her own clothes off, or something like that. Like, there has to be something where we see she consented, and unless you can prove it, you're out. Like basically, they're covering their own asses. So some girl brings a case, well, we can just get rid of that guy because we just, we have a feeling about this guy or whatever. He could be a liability, right? Universities are really, really worried about liability. Yeah. So as much as they're concerned about fairness, and I also think for parents, it's kind of a way of talking to your kids about this new rule idea of being a little bit more clear with your boundaries by saying, look, the university wants you to do this. Yep. I didn't say it. This is the university saying it. Yeah, it's not, you don't got to follow me.
All right, then you say advocate for yes. This is, again, very similar. Advocate for yes means yes, not no means no. So this is back to like what says let's go and let's
right. Well,
get
that's
the hell away from me.
Right. Because girls, the fact is that women don't say no as much as they actually mean no, and sometimes they say no and they're being coy, but sometimes they say no and they really do mean no. And like, how does a guy even have any idea which one it really is? So
then
again, like a basic question, yes,
which no becomes yes a lot quicker and easier,
right? Exactly,
and then aggressive.
Yeah.
All right. Don't take high numbers of assaults at a particular school as a sign that it is unsafe. Instead, search for universities with the largest number of reports.
Right. This is the idea that like if girls feel confident to report to their schools that they've been sexually assaulted, then the school is probably more like warm, like a place like a Baylor or whatever was like nobody was reporting anything because they were just like, oh my God, Baylor would never protect me. They only care about their football team and their new football stadium. And so like you're actually going to get maybe a touchy-feelier school if you exactly.
Explain to your kids that the risk is off campus, not on. So this goes to the Jameis Winston thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like the off-campus apartment with the senior guys, like that is actually like more of a dangerous situation than like when you watch the local news, you see the girls walking through campus, right, and it's dark and they've got their backs to you with the backpacks and there's like some tree over them and it's like scary, that's just ridiculous. Like I interviewed a lot of college kids who were like afraid to walk around at night, and you're just like, come on, this is not where there's not a lot of crime.
And it depends too where the school is. Like, if you're at NYU, well, that's that college, or Columbia, it's in New York City. Whereas I took my son to visit University of Alabama. Like you're in Tuscaloosa, the college is there. Yeah. Like you're not in the city, you're on campus. Austin's the same. University of Texas, I mean, the campus is in the city.
Right. You shouldn't walk around with money hanging out of your pocket, but you at the same time, you don't,
I mean, the line between what is campus and what is not campus is blurred. NYU, I mean, who knows?
Right.
NYU and Goldman Sachs, like, where are we? And crack.
Yeah.
All right,
that is what New York is made of.
If you don't have self-defense classes on campus, learn a few self-defense tricks.
Right. I mean, I think, again, like, no, I don't think the mace really works. But I think that, again, like these experts say, like, there's a lot of guys who, like, you say, oh, no. But you're not, like, really communicating it. And you're kind of, like, pushing, but not really. But, like, if you say something like, back off and push, or I don't want to do this and push, like, that kind of thing, like a guy who's kind of on that line of, like, being aggressive is just going to be like, whoa,
wake up.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
No, she really said no. Like, so that, I think I think we should teach, there's like a kind of, like, I mean, this is like a little bit kind of esoteric, but like there's kind of a feminist backlash against this. It's the guys' problem. The guys need to be the ones who control themselves. Girls shouldn't have to do all this stuff, but that's just like unrealistic,
Yeah, okay. Good one here. Tell your children if they're accused of sexual assault on a campus or any other disciplinary issue, actually, they must call immediately. Call the parents immediately?
Yes. So I think that, what you see, particularly like with these hazing scandals or issues around like binge drinking or anything like that's kind of criminal that happens in a frat, is like the guys don't call their parents. The frat calls the frat lawyer, and then like it's like the frat lawyer is getting all this information from the boys before they call the parents. Parents are on the hook. It's your
I was just gonna say,
homeowner
as
policy.
A parent, that's terrifying.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's your liability, right? And so you got to tell your kids, like, I know it might be scary and embarrassing and you think you're an adult, you can, well, maybe you don't say that part, but like, they think I'm so mature, I can deal with this. This is like, you need to call, even if you've been, like, I'm not just saying if you're a victim, I'm saying if you're accused of something, you need to call your parents for sure.
Immediately.
Yeah.
And this one I have a question on. So this is the last one. So bring consent education to younger students. And so like anything, whether it's this issue or cancer or, texting and driving, awareness is so important. Mike, I think I know what you're saying here, but as you were talking about girls graduating high school, going to college, it's all new. The world is this big. doesn't that happen when they go from the 8th grade to the 9th grade? Oh my God. There's 4 years of people here that I've never seen before. So it's like, that almost seems like the time to say, like, that's when we should start.
Yeah. So California's doing this, right? And California always kind of is the petri dish for these like social progressive ideas. But like, just like, sex ed, which doesn't happen everywhere, like doesn't have to just be about like scary pictures of STDs and this is how you put a condom on. It should also be about this idea of sexual respect. Like, okay, well, what is respectful? What is immoral but not illegal? What is a nice way? What they find is like, you get these boys who are like 14, they're like texting some girl they like 200 times, Okay, what
Snapchatting.
Snapchatting, sorry, I forgot. They're a bit younger than my reported group here. But like, how do you tell that boy, like, well, here's the boundary. Like, here's a way of acting nicely to somebody. She doesn't have to text you back. You're getting into, like, we don't have to label it stalking. We don't have to criminalize you. But we just say,
you're not a creep yet.
Like, my point of view is, like, let's look at this from, like, we're all together in the human project and we all want to make this situation better. Pointing fingers and calling people stalkers and rapists and all that stuff is, like, only going to get you, like, this far. Really saying, like, just come to the table. It's a different way of looking at things. Let's just try it, So, I think that's going to end up happening. I do think that that's going to end up happening.
I got it. It all figured out. I'm not even going to get into the school part because I never went to college. I was never an administrator. I never had a professor.
Maybe that's what you're looking at. Maybe that's your late in life thing that you're going to do. You're going to go back to college and be a...
I do joke, before I let you go, I do joke with my kids. Like, I was like, what if...
I went to college with you.
What if I went with you? And they're like, that is a terrible idea. I'm like, no, I mean, you'll never see me. Like, we can have dinner like once a month, but no. Like the idea of, this podcast that I do every week, like the amount of studying that I have to do, I'm like, whoa, like I never studied my whole life.
Yeah.
This
like
is
a
the most
education.
studying I've ever done in my life.
But that's what's cool about a podcast,
no
right?
Shit.
That's like
you should start your own
stuff.
podcast.
I'm on it. It's on my to-do.
Yeah, put it on there. Raise 2 kids.
Yes.
Write another
professional book. Career. Right, exactly.
Nuke Michelle Goldberg.
Right,
anytime you get an opportunity and start a podcast.
Boom.
Vanessa,
Done.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
So awesome.
So nice to
Good
see
to
you
see
again. Yeah.
No, jinx.
Buy me a Coke.
All right.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.